Did you want to just do introductions, or how would you want to start?
Whichever way you normally start, like I guess in some ways I gotta figure out why I'm here.
Right.
So, no, not necessarily why I'm here, but what's the objective of these gatherings that you have on Tuesday? Would be helpful for me to.
So what we do is it was part of the Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council that they started this initiative. It was part of, no, they're actually in Toronto right now. Chris is actually there right now doing a meeting with all the women across Canada.
Yeah.
And it was one of the action plans to document, and I guess because a lot of the elders are passing on and they want to document these stories. And so I am recording you, and it will be edited and then put on a website later on.
Oh yeah.
Just use things and people in general to, I guess, hear certain stories, like whether it be legends, whether it be, like I'm getting a lot of residential school stories.
Yeah.
Before, during, and after. I'm getting a lot of, some people telling about their hunting and sewing, and I got a wide range of stories from people.
Okay.
This project's wrapping up this month.
Okay.
So I think next Tuesday will be our last speaker, and then we're gonna compile everything, and I think it's just important for us to document these stories, because
All right.
because the people are really hungry and they want to hear. Like that's probably why everyone is here today,
All
because
right. Cool.
the knowledge is in the storytellers.
All right. Well,
Chief Smith told us about the Chilkat Wars. I didn't know they happened up there, that they came right close.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I think about. Like we were warriors in some of our nations were warriors, you know, and warriors in our own right in some ways, I guess you might say. Like you think about I guess some of the challenges we had in our lives, and you know how we had to fight to literally survive sometimes. And I guess one of the things that I think about, and just always being present, always being here for today, right? You always got to stay focused and be in the present. And when I look at these pictures around here, and you know, when you look at things around in your world, you got to be able to see yourself in the world, right? When I look at these pictures, there's a picture of my auntie. That's Auntie Martha Van Heel. You know, that's my dad's sister. And so if you look at that picture, it's my dad's sister. My dad had 3 sisters. One that one of his I think it might have been his oldest sister. She died when she was very young. And when you look at my Auntie Martha, you see one that's knowledgeable in medicines and knowledgeable in sewing and beading, and very enterprising. And I see Barb Hume. Like I remember when I was younger, I was actually going to be a teacher at one time in my life, and Barb was helping me with the funding part of my education. She was very, very helpful. She worked very hard to make sure that I was well supported. But I failed on my part because I wasn't able to complete my education. But she worked very hard to make sure that I had the success that I wanted to achieve. And that's my Auntie Sophie. So when you look at these pictures around, and you know, one of the things I think about is we got to be able to see ourselves in the world, right? And we got to be able to see ourselves in the world, because that's what we live in. We live in a place where, you know, we're represented in some ways. I think about the challenges that we have in our world, and I think about where we're at, and think we've come a long ways in all the things that we set out to do for ourselves as you might say, Indigenous people or First Nations. You know, I think we're in one of the most beautiful buildings in the Yukon today, like being in this cultural center. You know, I come from a community of Teslin where we have a heritage center. That's probably one of the first that was ever in the Yukon. We have a cultural center there as well. It's not as big as this, but we don't have a population of 25,000 people either. We have only a population of 400 people, so there's a significant difference. So, but I come from a place where we live by a big lake. I'm a Tlingit person. I belong to the Eagle clan of Teslin. There's 5 clans in Teslin. There's Frog clan, Raven clan, Raven Children clan, Wolf clan, Beaver clan, and Daxlawedi clan, and Deshiton. Beaver clan? Did I say Beaver clan? So there's like, did I mention 5? I hope I mentioned 5. They'd be insulted if I missed one. But there's 5 clans. And I belong to the Daxlawedi clan, which is the Eagle clan. My Tlingit name is Coach Nau, which used to belong to one of our clan leaders. Each of the clans have a clan leader. And one of the older clan leaders in the early days, his name, I carry his name. His name is Coach Nau, which means dead wolf. When you translate it to English, that's what it translate into. And there's supposed to be a story behind that name. It's supposed to be a rock that's on a mountain, and I'm the one that's supposedly to provide discipline when discipline is needed. Supposedly, that's from what I can understand. I have to truly hear from the person that knows about it. From what I can been told, that's what it means. I think about it in today's context, what dead wolf means. In my working life, I attend a lot of meetings. I find sometimes when I'm in a meeting, I often find myself sitting at a table where there's 2 tables, right where the tables join. That's where I always find myself sitting. It's weird. When I think about that and I think about my name, my Tlingit name, Coach Nau, it's almost as if, in some ways, when you think about it, when I think about it, it means almost like I'm the beginning, but I'm also the end. It's kind of weird, but that's the way I think about it. Like I help things to begin, but I also help things to end too, right? In some ways, when you think about it from that perspective. So when I look at my life and I look at how I understand myself to be and where I belong, I think that's what's really important to all of us as individuals. You have a sense of belonging to something, to some place, to somebody, or whatever it might be. And I think about the stories that I've been told about our history. Like we come in, I'm a Tlingit. I belong to the coast of Alaska. My ancestors come from the coast of Alaska. So they come in from over, we used to trade in the interior with all of the First Nations that live along the Yukon River mainly, because that used to be the main way of traveling was along the riverways, the waterways. So we used to come in and trade. And Russia used to own Alaska at one time. Did you know that? Yeah, you knew that. So when they owned Alaska, we used to trade with the Russians, the Tlingits. And then we trade whatever furs or whatever we got from the interior here, and we bring it to the Russians because the Russians like the furs that were brought in from the interior of the Yukon, as is now known today. So we used to go back and forth, and we used to be close to the people that lived in the Yukon. And then over the years, some of us eventually stayed on, and so we have Tlingit communities in Carcross and Teslin and Atlin, and so all of us are where we originate from is from Alaska. So that's pretty significant because, like for us, like I say, our clans in the Yukon, they have 2 clans. You have the Raven clan and the Wolf clan. And in our community, we have 5 clans. And I always remember a story we used to go to these various celebrations that they have in Alaska, and I remember once sitting with we were waiting to go on stage to perform and to dance, and one of our young kids, he belongs, my crest, like I belong to the Eagle clan, but we also wear the killer whale crest. And I remember one of our young kids that belonged to my clan, he was wearing a killer whale on his regalia. And one of the older gentlemen from Alaska who was also Tlingit, he asked me, he says, "Where are you from?" He says, he asked the young kid, he said, "I'm from Teslin, Yukon." And he says, "What clan do you belong to?" He said, "I belong to Killer Whale Clan." He looks at him and says, "You have killer whales in Teslin too?" He said. But that's the nature of our originality, right? Like we come from the coast, but we carry our traditions with us, right? Because it's about our identity and who we are and where we belong. And so that's a significant part of what I think is important for us. And one of the things that I think about is our adaptability and how we adapt. If you look at my vest, like Athabascans, because there's some of the tribes that belong to the Athabascans in the Yukon, right? Mm-hmm. And so the Athabascans, they have really, really beautiful beadwork, right? Like we do beadwork, like us as Tlingits do beadwork as well too. But the flowers and stuff that the Athabascans do are very, very beautiful. But so one of my relatives from Teslin did this vest. But what I added was the little abalone buttons, because that's one of the things that we use often on our regalia is the abalone buttons. And so we use beads as well. But I sewed some abalone buttons in the middle of the flowers. So it's kind of like when you look at that and how you can blend traditions in some ways. You can blend the traditions of our cultures. We can come together and make it work for ourselves, right? Because even though we're from Alaska, we still see ourselves being a part of what's here in the Yukon as well. And I think that's something that's always an important part of our living and our existence. And so like when you look at around, like a lot of the designs, and like that's a design that you would probably see anywhere on the coast of Alaska and British Columbia. Those are designs that you would see on a lot of the houses, the long houses or the big houses they call them. So it's pretty neat. I don't know if you had any questions for me or anything like that. You can stop me anytime, or if you had questions about it. Because be interesting to see what your thoughts are, or hear any questions you might have about anything that you're.
Yeah. In my case, I tried to read before about Tlingit people, and I read about you were organized 18 clans. Finally, because you said 5 clans in testing.
Yeah.
There are 5 clans.
Yeah.
But in total, how many clans?
In the whole Tlingit nation?
Yes.
I would have a difficult. I wouldn't know what that would be, but I know that in our community there's 5. Okay. In Carcross there's 6. Okay. In Acton I think there's also 6. But they got like there's so many different clans. Well, I should say there are a lot of different clans that are on the coast. The ones that we are a part of are the ones that are kind of in Carcross and in Athlin and in Teslin. And like there's on the coast of Alaska they have, like in the Yukon they have like a wolf and crow clans. On the coast of Alaska they have like a I think it's the eagle, like let's see, how is that structured?
So what was the purpose of it? Was it because Wolf Crow married opposite clans? It was for
Well, part of it, yes. Part of it is part of the, well, it's not necessarily the reason why it was like that, but part of it is in our culture, like the way our cultures work is that everything is, one of the things I often think about, like I don't know how many of you, lots of you have probably heard about residential schools, eh? Like residential schools had a really kind of really negative impact on a lot of our societies, not only in the Yukon but across Canada. And I once was at a conference where I had to open up the conference. One of the things that I said at the time was that, you know, when they first landed on the shores of North America, you know, if they had only asked the people that came, that were new to this continent, if the first people that they encountered, which were our first peoples of this land, if they had only asked us, you know, is there a language that you speak, that you communicate in? You know, they probably would have got a response of whichever nation they were meeting with at that time. You know, if they had said, you know, is there a certain way that you raise your children, that you bring up your children, they probably would have got a response for that as well. You know, you know, if they had to ask, you know, do you guys trade? Do you guys trade? How do you guys make a living? How do you guys survive? You know, they probably would have got a response for that as well. Right? You know, when you guys get sick, when your people get sick, is there a way you look after yourselves when you get sick? If they had to ask us that too, we probably would have had an answer for that as well. But when they landed, because they couldn't understand us, they just assumed we didn't know anything, right? So a bad assumption, which I think in some ways really impacted the relationship that we are trying to fix today. Because you hear nothing but reconciliation, you know, how they want to reconcile the relationship between the Indigenous people of Canada and the non-Indigenous people of Canada, you know, and they want to look at that, and, you know, and I would often think about that, and, you know, and I often, you know, you always can hope. But like I say, we're in the present, we're trying to do what we can today, and we try to have a strong impact on bringing about the change we see that's necessary, right? So in our culture, like the way that the societies are structured, like when we enter into relationships with people that are not of the same clan. Like if I'm going to marry, so like in Tasman we have like there's a Raven clan and there's the Wolf clan. It's a Wolf Moiety they call it, and the Raven Moiety. Now on the Raven Moiety they have like the Beaver clan, Frog clan, and the Raven Children's clan. On the Wolf side they have like the Duckflueti, which is myself, like also Killer Whale, and they have the Wolf clan. So like the wolf couldn't marry a wolf, and a wolf couldn't marry an eagle. They had to marry from the opposite side, just to keep the blood strong and keep the family strong. That's the purpose of that. So that's one of the reasons why they do that. So you look at that and think about the purpose of one of the purposes of having our clans is understanding that within the clans there's certain protocols, certain things that we do to keep our lives enriched. Like I think about our children, for example. Like when our children are being raised, it's the uncles that would look after the nephews, and it's the aunties that would look after and teach the nieces things that they need to know. And of course, the elders are the ones that hold the stories and have the stories, and they're the ones that share the knowledge of our past and how things were done. And so that's kind of how, when we look at bringing up our children, we bring them up like that, because And the parents are still the parents, you know, they still have to look after the children and discipline and do all the things they need to do, but there are things that are about our culture that our uncles can teach the nephews, and the nieces can be taught by the aunties. So there's a responsibility of that we have within those family structures that helps to keep our ways strong, but also to make sure that we're ready for the world. Like my aunties, both Auntie Sophie and Auntie Martha, their uncle used to be a guy named George Johnson. I don't know how many of you have heard of George Johnson. He's a famous photographer and the first car in Tesden. He was an entrepreneur. You know, he was ahead of it. They say he was ahead of his time. He lived in Tesden. Like in 1942, the Alaska Highway came through the Yukon. Okay, 1942. How many years ago was that? Who's good at math?
77?
Yeah.
77? 77 years ago?
60, yeah, plus 17. 67, 77.
77 years ago. So 77 years ago, the Alaska Highway came through the Yukon. You think about it in a time frame. If you think about anybody that's and you look at them and you say, oh, you say you're 77. Oh, yeah, that's not old, right?
Well, when you look at it too, it's like we're celebrating Canada's 150. And when I hear stuff like this, I'm like,
Yeah.
we've been here a long time.
Yeah.
Longer than 150.
Yeah. Well, we have been for sure, absolutely. But the thing is like when you think about the impacts of the non-native culture on our societies today, as we look at it hasn't been that long, like 77 years ago. So the Alaska Highway is 77 years old, and it's and so before that, like we had everything in place. Like you know, we had our trade routes, we still had our own way of having an economy. You know, we still depended on the land for a lot of the things that we had back then. You know, like all of that was all in place. So when you think about it from that perspective, it's not that far out of reach for us on where we sit today. Whereas in other places like closer to the east, you know, they've been impacted for over 500 years, right? And so the impacts of the non-native society on us, some of the impacts, both good and bad, has not been that long. But when I think about where we're at, like we had all of the, like I say, when they first landed on the shores of North America, if they only asked us a few questions about how we did things, you know, they would have had a good sense and probably would have even learned something from us, but they didn't. But my dad's and my auntie's uncle, George Johnson, like in the early 40s, and like he was a photographer. He got a camera. I don't know where he got his camera from, but he took pictures of days of activities and things that were going on back in the day. And you could see all of the, like when you look at the pictures, like you just see the healthiness of the people. You could see the wealth of the people. Like back in the day when he was taking the pictures, fur trading was big. Like fur trading was a big part of the economy. So when you look at some of the pictures, you see like wolf hides hanging, you see lynx hides hanging, you see black fox hides hanging, you see fox hides hanging there, you see marten, you see all of that, and that was a representation of the richness of the economy for our people back in the day. And that was all represented through his pictures that he took in his time. And the possibilities that he saw for himself as an individual, as George Johnson, as who he was, didn't just kind of wasn't short-sighted at all. The vision that he had for what he could do and for what he wanted for himself was bigger than we could imagine at the time. Because he came all the way from Tesden, where we live in Tesden. He drifted down the Tesden River, came all the way up to Hootalinco, up to Whitehorse here. He bought himself a car. He had furs, I guess, that he had traded or something like that. But he bought himself a car for $1,700 or something like that would have been in the 40s. Like if you think in the 40s, like 1700.
That's huge.
That's amazing. Like $1,700. Like that's a lot of money back in the day. But he bought himself a car, and
That's a lot.
Charlie Taylor, I think was his name, the guy at Tail and Jury. He got old Charlie Taylor to give him some driving lessons of this car that he bought, some Model A or something like Chevrolet. But he got old Charlie Taylor to give him driving lessons for a few hours. Showed him how to drive this car. So he bought this car, and from what I can understand, he loaded it on a barge or whatever, on a raft or whatever, and he took it down the river, and then he took it back up the Teslin River and took it to Teslin. You think about it, you've got a car and there's no roads. The only thing there are foot trails, right? So what are you going to do? So he could build himself a 3-mile road, and he had his car. He got his construction crew, which included my uncle or my dad and some of his friends or whatever. But like he got the crew. They built the road, 3-mile road, and then he charged $1 a ride. $1 back in those days was big money too, right? So it wasn't yeah. So if you could buy bubble gum for 5 cents or whatever, like back in those days, $1 is a lot of money, right? So I think about that, and I look at that, and I think about this one individual's view of the world, on what he saw that he wanted for himself, and how achievable it was and attainable it was, right? And I think that was so representative of who we are as a people in this Yukon, and in this land, this continent, right? And one of the important things that he taught my dad, and I often say in different places, he told my dad, he said that my dad used to tell the story, and he used to always say it almost like the way his Uncle George would say it. He says, "My dear boy," he said, "when you live in this world," maybe not the exact words, but he said, "when you live in this world," he said, you hold your culture in your right hand." My dad being right-handed, he said, "You hold your culture in your right hand, and you hold it close to your heart." He said, "because you're always going to need it." And he said, you take, back in the days, the white man's world, you take whatever you need from the white man's world, and you take what you need from it, and you use that to help you to get by. So he's talking about a balance of how we're to make it. And if you look at the way he lived his life, it's exactly what he was talking about. You look at what's out there, and you take what you need from it, and you use it for yourself to do whatever it is that you need to be doing for yourself. But you always remember where you come from, where you belong, and what it is that you're all about as a Tlingit person, as a First Nations person, whichever clan you belong to, because that's what's important. And when you look at some of the challenges we have as a result at residential school today, there's a great imbalance that is created for us, right? Because, we're struggling with our language. Our language, for many of us, we lost our language. When we went to residential school, it was an offense to speak your language. I've heard stories about that we're told about people that were caught speaking their language. And one of the ones that I remember the most is this one person. She said that the nun actually took a needle and poked it through her tongue. Did anybody ever hear that?
Yes.
You heard that?
Yeah.
And they literally poked that needle through her tongue for speaking her language. So when you think about that, and you look at the challenges we have today because of those kinds of actions for doing what was a part of who we are, what was meaningful to us, and for us being able to make it in the world, that was a very grave offense. So when you look at today and where we're at today, and you look at the challenge we have to overcome, and the work that needs to be done to help us to be really successful is major. Like I know some words in my language, in my Tlingit language, but I don't know it. I'm not fluent in it. I went to residential school when I was 5 years old. Just about, I think a little older than 5 years old, I went to residential school down in the Lower Post. And my mom used to say that I used to speak our Tlingit language. And so if I could speak it, then it means that I could also understand it, right? So when I went away to residential school and came back, I literally completely had forgotten it. And when I went to residential, I wasn't gone now that long, but I think I was gone long enough to forget it. Like I went away, I think probably in September, probably maybe could have been at the end of August. And back in those days, if you think about it, like Lower Post today is like a 3 or 4 hour drive. Back in those days, probably about an 8 hour drive. So it was a long journey away from my home to Lower Post. And you think about it, like I went there, you might as well say fully intact. Like this glass of water, right? Fully intact, water in there and everything, serving its purpose in life, right? It's the same with me. When I went away, I had everything. I had my language, I had family, I had my mother and father, I had my grandparents. You know, I don't think I had I think I might have had my sister back then. But I had everything I needed. So I went away to residential school, I came back, forgot my language, you know, and I kind of grew up like that, without my language. So when you think about that, and you look at that, and you go back to thinking about what Olger Johnson used to say, that old man, how important it is to hold your culture in your right hand and hold it close to your heart. You know, when you've forgotten your language, because they say your language, it holds 60% of your culture. If you can speak your language, you have a grasp of 60% of what you should know about your culture. The 40% is other things that are out there about stories and things like that. But what's in your language, is, they say, amounts to about 60%. So when you think about me going to residential school at age 5, having my language, understanding my language, coming back some months later without it, literally like 60% of the essence of who I am is totally gone. It's like wiped out. It's like, you know, when you on your computer, you got a file and you accidentally delete it, it's gone, right? It's difficult to retrieve. You got to go back and recreate that whole file. Can you imagine how do I create that for myself?
And you didn't delete it, someone else did.
Someone else did.
It wasn't your...
Yeah, absolutely.
It was...
Yeah, so when you think about that, and you look at that from that perspective, that's kind of like what I see. And but I think about that, and it's easy to dwell on the negative aspects of some of the challenges we have. We can get lost, and we can beat people up for the rest of our lives over that whole situation. But it's not going to change it for us, right? It's what we're willing to do to make that change for ourselves. So some of our younger people, like Melissa, has gone out, you know, got a higher education, and what was your area of study?
First Nation Studies.
First Nation Studies. Mm-hmm. So we think about that, and like a lot of our people are becoming very well educated. Some are receiving masters in First Nation Studies or First Nations language revitalization. So a lot of people you might say, we're going to beat them at their own game, yes, you might say, in a sense. And so our people are becoming very well educated, working very hard to bring back our language for ourselves. And in some ways, that's going to help a lot. But I think what's important for us is how do we retain what's currently here? Because not everybody is in a position to go to university or at an age to be able to go back to university, right? Like you look at all of our elders that are here that are, they have so much of the stories that are of our past and what you've been able to be a part of. I don't know how many sessions you've been here on Tuesday to hear what has been talked about, but there's so much richness about the history of our people here in the north and the Yukon and parts of Alaska, BC, northern BC. Like it's amazing the things that we've seen. Like I think about my dad, for example, and on the things that he used to talk about. He used to tell stories about how the Yeti got the Wolf Clan got to use their crest. He said there was a wolf, a guy that was out on the land, and he was out in the bush, and he was walking, and he said he looked behind him, and he said there was a wolf that was following him. And that wolf kept following, he was wondering what was going on, so he went and he turned, and that wolf looked at him, and he could see there was something wrong with this wolf, and so I guess he went over to that wolf, and that wolf had a bone stuck in his tooth or something like that, or in his gums or something like that. And that man took that bone out for that wolf, and by doing that he was given the right to be able to wear that crest of that wolf. And I think that's how he tells it. I could be a little bit off on that, but I think that's kind of pretty much how he told it. And it's interesting because a big part of who we are as First Nations people is we see ourselves as being part of the land, part of the water, part of everything that's in existence, right? We're a part of everything. There's nothing that we're not a part of. We're a part of everything. And I know my dad, one time he was out hunting wolves on a skidoo, and he chased this wolf, like he was chasing this wolf, and he couldn't catch up to it, but he could keep it out in the open, out on the lake. So every time the wolf tried to go in, he'd block his way and he'd keep it out until that wolf got tired. He said at one point that wolf just sat down. He just sat down. My dad went to take his gun and he was going to shoot it. And he said when he lifted his gun to shoot it, he looked at that wolf. He said when that wolf looked at him, he said just like that wolf, whatever that wolf did, he said my dad just looked at the wolf and he just couldn't shoot it. He just said something, that was not the thing to do. He put his gun back in his case and he never ever did that again. And they say a long time ago we had that connection with the animals, eh? Like we have a connection with animals that we could communicate with each other and we could do things for each other. My dad also told another story about this family. Their son went away, and he went away for some time, and he didn't come back for the longest time, and his parents were wondering where he was, so they went to see this medicine man. And they asked this medicine man for help they wanted to find out how his son was doing, like how their son was doing, whether he was okay or if he was not hurt or anything like that. They wanted to know how he was doing. So what they did is they went to see this medicine man. This medicine man had a helper. This medicine man called his helper to be with him. So what he did is he just literally, he laid down, I guess, wherever he was, he got his helper to be with him. What he did, he left his body and he got into the spirit or into a fox or something like that. I think it might have been a fox. And this fox traveled looking for their son. And he found him eventually. But he was gone for like 4 days. Left his body for 4 days. And so he got if you think about it, like he got his helper to sit with him to watch over and make sure that nothing bothered him as as he was there because he was not a part of his body, right? And so he went out, and those are the kinds of things that are a part of the way we did things, the way we were able to do things. Has that strong connection to those spirits that are out there. Spirituality, you always think about how important our spirits are to us. Each of us has a spirit, right, in us, and so part of it is that connection to the world that we have that's so unique. I was in a session this morning with another group of people, and this lady was telling me about it might have been about her grandson, and she was talking about who he was, and then she was talking about, I think one of her relatives or one of her uncles, I can't remember exactly who it was, but she said it's just like he came back, but her uncles passed on. But she said it's just like he came back to us, and that's the way we believe also too, is that people will return to us, and reincarnation. So that's one part of who we are as well. And I know that for Tasman for sure. There's individuals that are there that some people will say that just reminds me of old Johnny Jackson, or it just reminds me of so they have people have certain actions that they, or sometimes these young kids, they come up and they talk to individuals like they've known them for years and years, and they sit there and they're talking to these older people, and these older people are just blown away by that, because they bring up things that not too many people remember, and that's the amazing part about our culture. So I'm not sure about the time. How much time did we have? Was it an hour or? Okay. So.
Yeah, my nephew used to just drum and sing, and he was just 2, and he was really good at drumming, and that's kind of
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I think about. It's like, I think for us, I think the more people know about us, the more people know and understand who we are, and the more people understand about where we come from, the easier it is going to be for us. Because it's like when you go to other places, and if you, like, I've been to other places, other countries, and it's sometimes I find, that the more I understand about the people that live there, the more comfortable I am, right? And that's sometimes I think it's important. It's about how we interrelate with each other. That's important.
Maybe that's what's missing, is that the non-Indigenous do not understand the land that they're living on.
Yeah. Well, I guess like the best example of that is if you look at pictures. If you look at the Alaska Highway, when the Alaska Highway was being built, you see these soldiers with all of these dead animals, like bears. They're holding on to bears, and they're holding on to. They got the front of their vehicle full of geese or whatever. They're just like, you look at it, they just like literally decimated things because they didn't have that understanding of that connection to the land that we have. And I guess in some ways a part of looking at, not only do we have a responsibility to our people, to our children, and to our grandparents, to our parents, but we have a responsibility now to the greater world, which is teaching the world about our cultures, about the way we connect and interrelate to the land, to all the things that are in existence, right? It's about, if you look at just thinking about what you just said, it's about how do we help the rest of the world understand and know peace, eh?
The rest of the world has got it though.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to teach the Mexicans or the Filipinos or,
Absolutely.
It's the non-Indigenous that come in
Yeah.
and need to know, need to learn.
Well, it's not, I guess in a sense, it's not necessarily us as First Nations, but us as Indigenous peoples to the various continents that are around the world, the Chinese, the Japanese, all the people that are original people of those lands, they lived a certain way that the rest of the world is in some ways confused over in a way, right? Because it's could be related to capitalism, you know, and how the industrial age is related to capitalism. You know, the industrial age changed everybody's life in the whole world, right? So how does that, when you look at that, it was about somebody becoming wealthy, somebody, even though it was about advancing technology and an easier way to live, all of that had capitalism interwoven through it all, right? It's about the almighty dollar, you know, it's about making money, it's about making a profit, it's about, you know what?
And it's one of the I think it's actually 94 of the TRC calls to action of the 94 action movements. 94 is to educate people about the land which we are living on. So I think that's, and I know at CUF I'm really working on implementing the 94 calls to action with all levels of government, because now it's about reconciliation. I'm just wondering what reconciliation means.
It's reconciling, it's just about making peace, right? It's about making peace and working through the differences that are there. You know, like I look at it and think about it, it's to reconcile, it's, you know, it's if you're looking at a ledger, I guess it's balancing the books, right? And making sure that everybody's on an equal playing field, you know, like we always have been, you know, we haven't been treated very well, you know, and it's always been for the worse. Like you think about, the things that are there that are part of our history. Like not that we've always wanted to vote, but we couldn't vote until the late 60s, right? The First Nations people in Canada, they couldn't vote until they were like in the early 60s. They could actually participate in the voting system, but you know, like we couldn't. If we wanted to join the army or anything like that, we had to give up our status as Indian people, as an Indian person. We had to give up our status to join the army, you know, to do things like that. If we wanted to send our kids to a non-native school, we had to give up our status to send our kids to a non-native school. You know, just, you know, those kind of crazy things that just didn't make a lot of sense, but they were a way of controlling us. I guess probably the most notorious one is how the potlatches were banned on the coast of British Columbia. You know, the potlatches were a big thing. It was one of the biggest things in our societies is potlatches. A potlatch is about a demonstration of wealth, in a sense, that not wealth as you think about as money in the pocket or whatever, but a demonstration of wealth, of culture, of dancing, of knowing who you are, where you belong, the size of your family, the health of your family, the health of who you are, your ability to be able to gather and prepare food and to provide and share, and it's all about that. The potlatch was a significant part of our ways, and the government of Canada went out deliberately to banning potlatches. And so it was very systematic in terms of looking at the way, because you often hear some of the statements that what do they say, taking the Indian out of the Indian or something like that. You know, I think about that and look at that and think about what they attempted to do and failed to do. You know, because their failure is almost a double failure today, in a sense, if you look at it from that perspective, because our cultures are still strong yet. Our language is coming back for some of us. You know, our language is coming back. Our songs, our dances. You know, there are dance groups that are so well known around the world for being able to portray the songs and dances and stories of their clans, of their families. You know, that's worldwide. You know, I think about that and look at it, it's like it's what they attempted to get rid of has come back for us twice as strong. So when I think about that and I look at that, and I think it's a positive approach to looking at how do we come out of all of this and come back and be really strong in the way we are as Indigenous peoples in this country. And I think so much of what we're doing today is by being supported by all of those, like all of these elders that are here on these walls here that so much represent that of that. They say you got to do your best. You got to do your best, not just for yourself, but do your best for the ones that are coming behind you. Because you got to remember the ones that are coming behind you, because they're the ones that are going to look after you when you get old. If you don't look after them today, how are you going to expect them to look after you when you get old? You know, if you don't take care of them, teach them the right way, how are they going to know how to look after you when you get old, when you become an old person like these ones that are around us today? And that's our obligation. It doesn't stop. It doesn't mean that when I teach my nephews to look at how to look after things for themselves, but how to look after me also, they in turn got to do the very same for their children, because they got grandchildren that are going to be set with the responsibility of looking after themselves too, and for looking after my nephews. So it's a continuous existence that we live in, that we have to be, that we are a part of, and I think that's the rich part about all of it. Yeah. I mean, you got to find, you know, when I think about Stephen Covey. How many people know Stephen Covey here? Stephen Covey. He's a motivational speaker. Stephen Covey. You know the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People? Have you ever heard of that? You heard of that book too?
Yeah.
Yeah, have you read it? Mm-hmm. And if you think about that book, this guy, Stephen Covey, he's a motivational speaker. He provides inspiration. He teaches people how to do things in a way that helps them to be successful. You look at his teachings, he's got 7 habits that he has focused on. One of them is first things first. That's what he says, right? What do our old people tell us? First things first. You look after things here first before you go and do anything else, they tell us, right? The other one that he has as part of his teaching is begin with the end in mind. Right? That's what he says. That's what he teaches. Like this guy sold millions and millions of these books, and he's probably made millions and millions of dollars just from that. But our old people say the same thing. They always say, know what you want in the end. Before you actually begin, know what it is that you want in the end for yourself. What is it that you want for yourself? Be clear on that, what it is that you want for yourself in the end. Then you go and start doing what you got to do, right? You know, and I think about that, and I look at all the teachings that are there that our old people and younger ones speak about, or our teachings that people are out there that take, like Stephen Covey, for example. You know, like how he the things that he cites as being important to our success. Our traditional teachings are what make us successful in our culture and in our ways, right? So, you know, like I think about, you know, like my understanding and my knowledge and the things that I know about, it doesn't just come from what I've been able to put together in my brain, right, or whatever. It comes from all the experiences that I've had over my lifetime. Like I'm 59 years old. Like I've had lots of time to live, right? You know, so like all those experiences, I've been able to make good on a lot of them. And so because I've been able to do that, that I'm here today talking to all of you and sharing with you some of the things that I've come to understand about what my life is all about. You know, and I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. And I think in large part, it comes from what my father used to say. You know, they always say the most difficult relationship sometimes is between a father and a son, right? My dad would say, this is the way you do it, Eric. And I'd be sitting there thinking of a different and a better way to do it. right? It's a natural thing for a father and son. That's why they say it's better for the uncles to teach the nephews, right? Because the father and the son is all, the father and son relationship is, I'm always going to be able to do better than my dad. My dad's going to show me how to do it, I'm going to do it better, right? It's natural. So it's why they say, you know, it's always important for the nephews to teach the uncles to teach the nephews. So, but part of it all, I look at it and think about where we are at today, and as you say that about the reconciliation and about how it is that what's going to make it different for us is that the better people understand who we are, where we come from, and what we're all about, the easier it is going to be for us to have a relationship, to maintain a relationship. You know, when I think about that, you know, because you look at our people, like when you hear things about what people say, you know, they're, you know, a bunch of drunk Indians, you know, they make up these nicknames for us, you know, like about stick Indians and stink Indians and you name it. We got some kind of a label, you might say, right? And it's being able to change that perspective for people. It's to see that there's a richness in our culture, there's a richness in the way that we live. Because if you look at the Yukon in general, there are families that have not from here that have moved. Now they're third generation Yukoners. The knowledge that their great grandchildren have of the ones that came some time ago, 3 generations ago or whatever, the knowledge they have of the Yukon and the things that they've been able to learn from the people that live in the Yukon, like ourselves as First Nations, have helped them to be who they are today. They know where to go hunt in the rivers, they know where to hunt on the lakes, they know where to go to fish on the lakes, they know where to go fish on the rivers. You know, some of them have trap lines, you know, some of them are very successful trappers. You know, we have people that are here that do carving, they're non-native, but they learn so well that they're almost, in some cases, even better than us, right? So a lot of the things that we have that make us who we are, it's not necessarily there for the taking, but it's there for the sharing, right? And I think that's what it's all about. So I think I've talked enough, you think?
That was really good.
Because I was trying to understand what I was going to talk about. Because I usually have an idea from a piece of paper that says this, and this. But I'm grateful and I'm thankful that you asked me to come. I'm sorry I couldn't be here last Tuesday. It just didn't quite work out. Like it was a bad commitment for a day, like the end of the month.
Well, you're a businessman.
Yeah.
And you're a leader.
Yeah. I used to be a chief in Tesla in my home community.
And AFN.
And Assembly of First Nations. And you know, I think about that and I think about how when I was growing up as a kid, I used to hear these people make speeches and I used to be so in awe of those guys all the time. And I used to think, I used to never ever think that I was going to be that way with myself, right? But I guess you are who you are, right? And I'm grateful that I've been given the privilege of being a leader in our community, but also here in the Yukon. And in some ways still continue to be a leader in different things that I do. So, my wife and I own a business in Teslin. Uncle George Johnson, my dad's uncle, he used to own a store in Teslin. Like a little general store. He sold peanuts and coffee and tea and sugar and flour. And he used to have a store. He not only owned the first car in Teslin, he was the first, I think, Plinkett to own a store in Teslin. Now, I guess you might say I'm following in his footsteps. I own a store now. My wife and I both own a store in Teslin. So we do pretty much the same thing as he does. So we're following in his footsteps. I guess one of the things that I sometimes regret is my mom and dad never lived long enough to see me own a store. But I think they were quite proud of me for one of the things that I was able to do in my life, to be a chief, to be a leader. You know, like one of the things I know about being a chief, once I was told They said when you get selected to do a job like that, that you literally, you give up yourself to that job. Like you don't belong to yourself anymore, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah.
You no longer belong to yourself anymore. You're a servant to the people. So that's the way I always viewed my job. Like when I look at the work that I do, I am a servant of the people, and I serve the people, and I don't belong to myself. And in some ways, I think I still don't belong to myself yet, but that may never end. But part of it is I have a role that I have to fulfill in my life, and this, in some ways, is a part of fulfilling that obligation that I have to the greater good, right?
Is that the old wolf? Is that the old wolf as the leader, as the,
I'm not sure.
your name?
Oh my God, dead wolf, eh? Was what?
Well, but dead wolf, that's an English translation.
Yeah.
What would it mean in your language, like?
It's
an
like it's
old
a
wolf?
discipline.
It looks at an old wolf.
It's not necessarily. I don't know if it's an old
Is
one,
it-
it's a disciplinary one. Eh? There's stories behind it. It's supposed to be a big rock as a representation.
But not dead, I mean, it's not,
It's not a dead thing.
not named, yeah, it's more what the wolf did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Possibly,
Tell me,
yeah.
I mean,
Possibly. The way I understand it is that it's about. I guess it's about disciplining. It's about the representation of it's a rock that's on a mountain. A story about a rock, and I don't know the full story, to be honest. And what I offer to that name is just my understanding of how I live my life in a sense, and how things have been for me, you know. But there's also, when I think about it, like there's Goch Nau, which means dead wolf when you translate it to English, but also in the Crow, the Raven clan, they have a similar name, which is Yeh Nau.
That was my brother's name.
Yeah, Yeh Nau, dead crow. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like that, I think. But it's pretty interesting.
It is interesting. Powerful. Like whenever I hear the language or hear stories about the languages, you can just feel the power.
Oh, yeah.
Come from.
Yeah, and it's well, I can think about that. I think there's so much about who we are. Like I think about the stories about, they have this like you think about the Bible, for example, right? When you look in the Bible itself, if you look in the back, there's a portion of it that's written in many different languages, eh? But ultimately, the message is the same, right? And it's the same with our teachings. Ultimately, like we live in different parts of the world, but ultimately, the teachings that we have about where we are, originalities, are where we originated from, about how we have a sense of belonging to where we are from. It's all this similar in a sense, eh? It's all similar. And it's about the connection that we have. Something like they say, if you can see yourself and other things, then it's meaningful. Like in the Bible, I often think about this. I've said this before. Is that Jesus, he was going out to teach somewhere. Some of you might be familiar with it, but he was going out to teach, and he wanted two people to come and help him. The one individual that he asked to help him, he said, "I can't go now because he had a death in his family." And I think Jesus' response to him at the time was, "Let the dead take care of the dead, the living take care of the living." In our ways, that's the way it is for us. We don't necessarily just walk away from a death, but there's certain things that we have to follow, protocols that we have to follow, how we are to look after our people when they pass on to the next world. But ultimately, our responsibility is to the ones that are left behind, and how we have to look after them, right? Because that's really important. Just like what Jesus says in the Bible, and how we look at it's like that interrelation of how we see ourselves and other things, right?
or your language?
Slingit. Slingit. They say it's something Tlingit. It's T-L-I-N-G-I-T.
Okay.
How do you say it?
They say, some people,
I know.
when you say Tlingit, say Tlingit, you say Slingit. Slingit.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's from Chile.
You're from Chile?
Yeah, I'm from Chile.
Oh, wow, cool. So yeah, like strong, rich culture in Chile too, eh? Like the cultures are very strong.
Yeah, all the time when you talked, I know about Mapuche people or First Nation,
Mhm.
and they are very connected with the land and the respect of the land. But we have many problems with the government, so Mapuche people is still fighting
Yeah,
by for their rights.
yeah,
And it's it's totally different. It's I think we need to learn more about how to deal or how to treat or how to live together even, because even Chilean people, we don't respect the native people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Mapuche people.
Mhm.
So it's hard. It's sad. It's
Yeah.
sad. It's sad. A bit sad in Chile what happened with the native people. So I was listening to you, and it's the same. The region or is the same. You are here or in the Yukon, in Canada, or wherever in Europe, or all the native people have the same. How can I say, the same
Aspirations.
aspiration of goals of the same ideas. So
Yeah,
they are connected in some many ways. We I mean, people in general, we need to know more about and learn about
oh yeah.
you, about First Nation, about their culture.
Well, I think that's like, there's so many things to learn about. Like, you know, like you think about it, because there's so much that each of us that have. Like, I think about my grandfather, my dad's, my mom's dad. Back in the early 70s, we had like maybe 6 television sets in Teslin, 1 TV station. We still had outhouses, you know, like outdoor biffies or whatever you want to call them, you know. And my grandfather was telling my uncle, he said, you know, one day, he said, you're going to buy water, and you're going to buy it in bottles, and you're going to pay more for that water than you pay for a gallon of gas. He just said that. He just said that. You know, back in the 70s, you think about that. Like where the heck did that come from? Like, where does that, did it come on a piece of paper? No, it came by a way of connection to what's out there that we don't see. You know, and you know, I think about somebody once said, you know, that they say they prophesized that the eagle one day would land on the moon, right? They prophesized about that. So, like, you think about an eagle flying around, and look and you say, well, how's that going to get to the moon, right? So what's the first thing they said when they landed on the moon?
Eagle has landed.
The eagle has landed, right? You know, you think about that, and you look at stories about this place here in the Yukon. I know the First Nations from Pelly and that up in that area, they saw a long snake going through the Yukon. Not the highway, but the snake represents this railway that one time they were proposing to build. And they saw it as a snake. You know, what does that, when you look at that and think about that, what do they use railways for? For extracting resources, eh? Quick way to get resources out. You know, what goes out, but also what comes in too, right? So you think about that. You know, so there's lots of things that are there that are part of what we are all about. So, good enough?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad I was able to come
Thank
do
you so
this.
much.
You betcha.
Yeah, we got a long meeting.